Welcome, Sandy. It's so great to have you here. I really appreciate you being a part of the Beyond Limits Virtual Summit. And, I've been looking forward to this conversation because you and I have known each other now a number of years, and I've been personally impacted by your teaching, and I'm excited to give everybody an opportunity to hear from you as well. So thank you so much.
You're welcome, Barbara. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, why don't we start out with you sharing a little bit about who you are and what you're up to?
Okay. Again, my name is Sandy Krot, and I call myself a human dimension consultant. Just, I don't know. I don't know if I invented the term or I read it somewhere. I work with people in business, primarily leaders, but everybody's a leader in some way or another. But primarily, I work with top level leadership teams. And I'm there to help them accomplish what they want to accomplish at their work. I partner with them on whatever goals they're trying to reach. But I do that by helping them see how their mind works, and helping them realize the enormous potential that our mind has to bring us what we need, particularly when we're up against difficult times. And I think for the most part, many leaders today, because life is so complicated and complex, they're facing problems that they had never had to face before. And this is pre-coronavirus pandemic. Even before that, I think that the leaders that I was working with were facing lots of complex issues that their previous experience wasn't addressing. And so they really had to find a whole new way of operating. And so that's what I do. I help them achieve their goals through an understanding of the potential that's within them.
Yeah, I look forward to hearing you articulate more of that and what that means to you, Sandy. And I'd love though to hear, what was it that you originally saw for yourself that made you even decide this is what you wanted to do, that this is what you wanted to share?
Yeah. Well, I started out my career many years ago, a million years ago, as a counselor, as a mental health counselor. I was had a master's in psychology, and that's what I had wanted always to do. And I'd worked in the field for about 5 years or so, and was already burned out, and was ready to leave the field. But I happened to luck out, and I came across somebody who shared with me some knowledge that at first when I heard it, I thought, that's a little bit too simplistic. But the more I listened, the more insights I was having about it. And I started to change. And I would share a little bit with my clients, and they started to change. So, I was always somebody who looked for results, and I was getting them really for the first time in my career. And honestly, if I could sum up what I saw, and I saw it in very, very elementary way, I saw that I was living in a world of thought. I went to hear someone speak. His name is Sydney Banks, and he spoke for 2 days. And the only thing I remember from the entire 2 days was that phrase, "You live in the world of thought." And I remember when I heard it, I got goosebumps because I knew it was true. I just knew it was true. Sometimes you just know when you hear something true. I knew it was true, but I really didn't know what it meant. And so over the course of several months after that workshop that I attended, I kept looking to see, what did that mean? And I slowly started to see, oh my God, I do live in a world of thought. I'm I would have this experience of being miserable, irritated, bothered, ready to quit my job. And then an hour later, a day later, nothing's changed. I have exactly the same job and I love it. And I couldn't before, or I didn't really notice that phenomenon before, I don't think. And then I saw, oh my God, it's thought. It's thought. This is what he's talking about. Your thinking changed. That's the only thing that's changed. Everything else is exactly the same. And so I just kept seeing that deeper and deeper and deeper. Now, 45 years later, I feel like I'm still just learning that very simple but profound fact. And at some point in my career, I got the opportunity to share what I was learning, what I knew, with business people. Now, I had no intention of going into the world of business. I don't come from the world of business, obviously. I was a psychologist. I ran a business, a not-for-profit organization, but it wasn't, I had never worked in business. But lo and behold, I discovered that sharing this understanding with business leaders went over extremely well. They responded very well. They loved the common sense of it. And they started getting results. And so I made the decision about 20 years ago or so to leave my clinical practice, leave my mental health counseling practice. And now I work exclusively with leaders in business.
Yeah, and I'm curious, say a little more, like when you say they see the common sense in it, say more about that.
Well, I think all of them knew or realized or could recognize, once I pointed it out, that there were days when they would come into work and they would just be on fire. Everything they touched turned to gold. They seemed to have decisions right off the top of their head. Everything looked clear, and then there were days when not so much. And they noticed that that was true of their colleagues, but they couldn't see why. They didn't understand what was the difference between one day and the next. They didn't think to look in the direction that I was pointing. Most people don't look in the direction that we're pointing. It looks like our experience, either our experience or the behavior of others, is the source of what's happening inside of us, or how we're feeling, or how we're experiencing things. It looks like the world is out there and we're just responding to it. And so most people are looking in this direction. We're looking at what's happened. And it doesn't occur to us to look in the other direction. It doesn't occur to us to look before. Where does that capacity to experience come from? And how do you account for going into the very same job one day and having a fantastic time and being very productive, and going in another day and being all thumbs? It's the same world, it's the same job, it's the same coworkers. And so they got intrigued, like, yeah, that's interesting. What is the difference? And so they began to look in a different direction. They began to look within, and they began to see how their moment to moment thinking was affecting their perception, their feeling, the very reality they were seeing. And once they saw that, for the most part, business leaders like to think they're in charge, and they don't like to be victims of anything, or to be under anybody's thumb. Well, what they saw when they realized that what they were experiencing was actually coming from within them, coming from something that was going on within their mind. Once they saw that, they realized, whoa, this is powerful. This means that I can't be a victim. It means that there's nothing out there that can make me experience it in a certain way, that can cause me to feel a certain way. And that was very empowering to them. And of course, it's also true. So they got to work in harmony with the way their mind is actually designed. A very, very different life.
Yeah, and it is. I think it's, in a way, it's like a really revolutionary to see, oh, my internal state of mind isn't coming from outside, it's coming from inside. And what I think so important about that is to know that we can have any kind of experience, any kind of thought about anything that's happening. So, a circumstance isn't predicting our thinking. And that realization, like you said earlier, that we have this amazing potential of our minds to have those aha moments, a fresh perspective, to get bogged down and then clarity comes, to really see how that works.
Yeah, yeah. When you start to look in the direction, the inward direction, where your experience is actually coming from. What I like to point out to people is that there are actual principles that govern how your mind works. There are actual scientific principles that are constant. And one of these principles is the principle, we call it the principle of mind. And it's pointing to the fact that there is an intelligence that makes life possible. And guess what? Your mind is powered by that intelligence. And you have this capacity to think, that's another principle, and you have this capacity for consciousness or awareness that allows you to have an actual experience in the moment. You put those principles together and they create your experience right now. But they also point to the fact that there is an endless supply of possible things to think, because this intelligent energy behind life is powering your mind, and it's a potential source of all kinds of new thinking. So leaders used to think, well, they're kind of stuck with what their experience has brought them, what their knowledge base is, which again is great. Thank goodness we have a memory. Thank goodness we have a knowledge base. Thank goodness we can learn from our experience. That's all great. But when you're faced with something that is brand new and there's nothing in your memory to help you, it's wonderful to know that there's another resource. It's wonderful to know that there's something else available to humanity that could potentially bring them a brand new thought about something. It's also good to know that when you're just stuck, or in a state of confusion, or you're bothered or irritated, that there's a possibility that in the next moment you can have a new thought that will bring you in completely different experience. So it's such good news, and it kind of flies in the face of what most leaders had been doing up until that point. Many of the leaders I talk to are of the, I'm going to make it happen, I'm going to work hard, I'm going to work faster, harder, more. They push, they really clamp down. and they stress themselves completely out, burn themselves out, exhaust themselves. And when I point out to them, look, you've got a resource here. You can relax a little bit. There's something else available that actually has been giving you ideas since the day you were born. And it's been helping you out. It's just that you didn't necessarily recognize the source of it, and you don't count on it. You're much more comfortable counting on the push and the, and that work harder, faster, stronger idea. You don't have to. There's something far more powerful than that available for us.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the distinctions in the work that we do, because I think when people start first hearing us talk about there's a power and potential of the minds, and then there's this kind of innate nature that, you can rely on, and you have been, we can access it. Often I think out in the world now, there's a lot more out there about, yes, okay, my mindset has an effect on the quality of my performance, or, however they want to say it. But I think what you're speaking to right now, Sandy, is that what's different is, prior to this work, I know for myself, I saw, oh yeah, the quality of my thinking affects things. Like I saw that. But it looked like it was up to me to manage that. And I wasn't very good at it.
Yeah.
Can you speak to that a little bit?
Well, let me tell you a story, because it's
Great.
it's a really actually a very touching story. I worked with this woman executive, and actually her boss asked me to work with her because she was just in a state of overwhelm, complete overwhelm. Really brilliant woman, very, very capable. Her boss did not want to lose her. She was just a key member of the team, but she was struggling. The company was going through a reorg, and she was literally having to do two jobs. That's what was happening, because she was in a new role, but her role hadn't been filled yet. And so she's very conscientious. So she was just in complete overwhelm. So I spoke with her, and she's describing how difficult her situation was, how hard her life had been, her job was. And then she says, and I'm married, and I have 4 children. One of them is my biological daughter, and 3 are my stepchildren. And I have a 16-year-old stepdaughter who is not speaking to me. I mean, we are completely at odds. And my husband is not happy. He's complaining because I'm working all the time. So she says, wherever I go, there's no break. And she says, I keep trying to figure it out. And, I come to work and I try to figure out, what am I missing? What am I doing? What do I have to do? I go home and I try to talk to my daughter. I try to figure out, what am I going to say? How can I mend this chasm between us? And I try to figure out what I can do for my husband. And I'm listening to her talk, and I'm struck by how many times she uses the phrase, I'm trying to figure it out. And I said to her, you keep saying, I'm trying to figure it out. What do you mean? And she said, well, I had something happen to me in my past, and I think about it a lot, and I figured that out. I want to figure this out too. So I said, well, tell me. And then she tells me that when she was young, she married the love of her life, her college sweetheart, and they were just, deliriously in love. She said, he was just my soulmate. And after a couple of years of marriage, she got pregnant. And they were just, over the moon about this pregnancy. And when she was 6 months pregnant and her husband was 32 years old, he died. He just died. He just dropped dead. His heart stopped. No health history, just died. And she said, I was profoundly sad, but I knew that I had to keep myself stable because I was 6 months pregnant. And so I just stayed. She says, I stayed settled. And I gave birth, and my family kept expecting me to fall apart. And she said, I never did. And I raised my daughter, and there were hard times, but I always seemed to know what to do. And I'm wondering, how come I can't do it this time? And I said to her, what makes you think you did it the first time? And she said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, what makes you think you made it happen the first time, that you figured it out? She said, but it was me. And I said, I know, but do you see that when you were going through that, you kept being taken care of. You kept getting ideas. You kept hearing this wisdom in you. You need to slow down. You need to be settled for this baby. Yes, you're sad, but you need to be proactive here. You kept getting those messages. You weren't figuring it out. Your mind was providing you with what you needed. And it can do it again. You got the same mind. And I watched her, she just got very quiet. And we finished up our time together, and I spoke to her the next week, and she said, Sandy, I realized that I was just trying to control everything. I was trying to manage my family. I was trying to manage my job. I was trying to manage my own mental health. And I was exhausted. And I realized that I didn't do that when my first husband died. I just trusted that I was going to know what I needed to know when I needed to know it. And so she said, you know what I did? I took 3 days off from work, which, if you had suggested to her, take 3 days off from work, she would have said, there's no way. But she took 3 days off from work. And she said the first day, all I did was walk on the beach. It's winter. She's from New England, from the East Coast of the United States. And she just walked on the beach. Nobody else was there. She said, and I just walked and walked and walked. And she said the second day, I took my 16-year-old and told her to take a day off from school. I called her in sick. And we watched movies and made popcorn and just hung out and just reconnected. And the third day, I told my husband he had to take the day off. And we just spent the day together. She said, I got back to work. And of course, I had even more work than I had before because I'd been gone for 3 days. But she said, the stress was gone. And I took one thing at a time, and I did what I could, and some things aren't going to get done. That's what I mean by there's this capacity that we have. Now, we don't rely on it or use it as much as we could because we think we have to figure everything out. And that's one reason. The other reason is we think that our stress and our upset and our bother is being created by what's happening to us. It's the workload. It's the crazy boss I have. It's the lazy coworkers. It's this, it's the customer. It's the unreasonable customer. We think that's the cause of our inability to listen to our own wisdom and common sense. It's not true. It's a misunderstanding that plagues the world. Our upset and bother, as well as our goodwill and our joy, are being born inside our own minds with our own thinking. That's where the power is. That's where the action is. You see that? So much thinking falls off your mind because you just stop blaming everything and everybody for what's happening to you. And that kind of thinking just gets rendered useless. And what do you have left? Well, you have a mind with less on it. You have a mind with less on it, it tends to be filled up with new thinking. It tends to be filled up with the thinking that we need to take care of things in the moment.
Yeah, and I think that's when people get curious and just look and explore this, I think one of the natural implications of it is you realize how well you do in the unknown, how well we do in real time, that we can put our certainty not in the environment or that we're going to have it down pat, but that we're resourceful, that our minds will serve up whatever is helpful in that moment. And so it is very interesting because I used to put my confidence in my experience, or you hear people in business talk about they put millions of dollars into processes and strategies. And listen, those things are part of business. I'm not saying anything about them, but we all have stories of those things breaking down, right? Not going quite as planned. Yeah.
Isn't it interesting? We do think that our security comes from knowing the future.
Yeah.
Well, who knows the future?
Yeah.
Who would have predicted 6 months ago that a pandemic would be taking over the entire world? Nobody. Well, apparently there were a few people,
yeah.
but nobody was listening to them.
Yeah.
So we think we know the future. We all do. We live in this false sense of security that we know the future. We don't. We don't. But we can know that we'll be okay when the future gets here. We can know that. We can put our security behind that. And that's just so good to know, because then that means no matter what happens, we'll find a way. We'll see something.
Yeah, as you say that, I'm always struck, and I'm sure you are too, but we go in, we'll work with organizations and leaders, and like you said, we're supporting them for whatever they're up to, whatever goal they have, or work they're looking to get resolved, whatever that might be. But it's always amazing to me that at some point in the work, they will begin to talk about that resiliency that they have. They'll talk about how it's affecting their family life. They'll talk about how they realize that their well-being is not dependent on any of the deal going the way it's supposed to, the project working out, their employees doing what they are supposed to, so many things. When people really see that their well-being is not at the mercy of those things, again, it gives them a different kind of sense of themselves and the possibility and what they have going for them, in the midst of all that.
Isn't it true? I mean, you really, I call that psychological freedom. And that's really what it is. Mm-hmm. You are free. You're free, which is most of us would say, you want to be free? Everybody sign up for that. But, we're psychologically free and we don't know it because we have bought into a false idea that the world does it to us. You look I mean, pick up any newspaper, or read any book, watch any TV show, listen to country music. I mean, it's everywhere. This misunderstanding that something other than our own thinking can cause us to feel a certain way or to have a certain experience. It's just not true. And to know that, it doesn't mean that everything's going to work out in your life. You know, I've had some very difficult things happen since learning this understanding, very, very difficult, but I've been so grateful for knowing that, yes, this terrible thing is happening, and yes, I wish it wouldn't have happened, but I'm going to be okay. It's very, very good to know.
Yeah. And I'm wondering, Sandy, as you mentioned, you know, just a little bit ago, we're filming this, we're, you know, sharing this content at this time when we're all experiencing this global pandemic. And I know the business world is significantly impacted around the world. And I'm curious, you know, if you could speak to how this understanding is helping and the people you work with right now.
Great, yeah. I read this really a good quote recently, and I hope I don't mess it up. It was something like, there isn't a problem so bad that we can't make it worse.
That's good, yeah.
And it was a quote from an astronaut. It was a Canadian astronaut whose name escapes me at the moment, but he was on a spacewalk, his very, very first spacewalk. Now, you know, a spacewalk, the margin for error really small. And he goes blind in one of his eyes. And then he goes blind in his other eye. And he says, I remember thinking, okay, don't make this worse than it is. He just knew that, you know, you could go anywhere in your mind when something like that happens. And he knew that if he did that, he was toast. And I think what's happening for my clients is they're realizing, oh man, they can make this very big problem a whole lot worse. And they see not to. It's as if there's this big puddle of mud in front of them and they're about to step in it and they don't. They realize, whoa, what's going on in my head? What's happening in there? Okay, I got way over into the details, or I got way into the future, or I went into worry, whatever their personal habit is, they catch it. And once you catch what you're doing psychologically, once you wake up, it changes. You can't help it. You just can't help it. It's like being in an argument with your spouse and the phone rings and it's your favorite aunt and you just can't go back. Where were we? But you just can't go back. And so when you wake up to what's going on inside, your mind just settles down. It just does. And you don't do it. You don't make it happen. You don't clear your head. It just clears. It's like, you know, you're have a jar with muddy water in it and you stop shaking it. Well, there's no more muddy water. It's the mud's on the bottom and the water's clear. That's just the way our minds work. So they catch themselves and then they get the benefit of a free and clear mind. And if they're going to come up with a solution or a creative next step, it's going to be when their minds are free and clear. And so that's what they're telling me. They're just so grateful that it's not that they don't still get stressed, upset, pissed off, bothered, worried, angry. I mean, you name it. They get all those feelings. But at some point they remember where they're coming from. And they remember, they see, oh man, that's gonna make it worse. And they stop and they settle and something new shows up.
Yeah, I love the simplicity in that, because there's truth in it, right? And I think it's true. I think when we realize, that I had a client say recently that, they've been working almost 24-hour days, and, they're involved in the markets, and, it's been pretty volatile. And she said that one of her saving grace has been when she catches herself worrying, is she knows the worries just pointing her to where her mind is. End of story. Like, nothing else behind it.
Yeah.
And I love the way you're saying it's like when we know that, we kind of, well, naturally won't, we see we don't want to make it worse, and so we're willing to kind of step away from it a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's also, I'm curious if you have seen any of this, but for sure, at a time when we need to be agile and adapt and resilient and creative, and you see, like, in that clear, freer mind, we access that. We see it, we experience it. But I'm also, I've had quite a few people in business who are saying when they don't go down the rabbit hole of a scary future, or they don't get too far ahead in their minds, they're also seeing like there's nothing to be done right now.
Yeah. That's, I think that's really wise to just to realize that there's so little we know for sure, and then you think you know it, and then 2 days later there's a whole nother something gets found out, and we're back to square one. So to not act, to not rush ahead, to not do anything can be the wisest move that we can make. To be comfortable with that. Yeah, I think again, business people are go, 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 action, action, action. And the wiser business leaders are seeing, when chaos is happening around you, it may not be the best time to make a move. It may be a much wiser thing to just sit and watch and wait. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's it. It's like there's, in that place we sort of see with more perspective, and that knowing it, it's, how you were saying that we aren't manufacturing the thinking and the insight and the creativity. It's like you also see that, like, clarity is also something that comes through, and so in that space you have a knowing about the next step. You may not know step B, C, or D, but often we know the very next thing to do, including do nothing, right?
Yeah. Or we know we don't know.
Yeah.
I think that's the other thing, to be comfortable. Look, I don't know what to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Rather than fake it.
Yeah.
Or pick something, at random just because you think you have to. To be able to say, look, I don't know yet. I mean, it's not that every single time I have mental clarity, I know what to do. That's not true.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes I'll want an insight about working with a client, or writing a newsletter or something. I just want, but I can't snap my fingers and have insight on demand. I'll walk the dog and I'm like, hey, how come I haven't had an insight yet? I walked the dog. It doesn't, and you come to accept the fact that this is not on anybody's schedule, but it'll happen. And maybe there is nothing to do right now. Maybe there's still something for me to see I haven't seen yet, that's going to inform my work with my client or my next newsletter or whatever.
Sandy, I've loved this conversation, and I just want to give you an opportunity before we end. Is there anything else that you would like to share or you think would be helpful for people?
Wow. Um, well, I think honestly, we all, in our heart of hearts, know that there's something bigger than our little, our little mind um, available. I think we all know that because we've all had experiences where we just were able to receive some knowledge or um, a couple of words of wisdom or the direction to head in. We just were able to get what we needed in the moment. We all have experiences of that. So I think we all know that there's more um, somewhere deep inside. And my message is it's true. You do. You do. You have a lot, you have the wisdom of life flowing through you. And if that's not enough, I don't know what is.
Thank you, Sandy. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Barb.